Adam, I was wondering about with the Pentagon, with Cheney, not shooting down Flight 77. Do you think that was incompetence? Do you think that was intentional? And then a lot of people wonder about how the plane hit the part of the building that was being renovated. Do you think that's just random chance, or do you think that that was planned, or just what do you think about that?
Wow, what a question. We'd have to go backwards to go forward. So my theory is something that isn't based on speculations. The public record. I think that the 9/11 attacks were known to the intelligence apparatus, especially to the NSA, because they had a tap on not just Bin Laden's satellite phone at this point, but also to the house in Yemen. Not to mention, you had the Amdocs investigation where Israelis were actually listening in to the phone calls of the DEA, FBI. So put this all together now with the Saudis financially giving aid to some of the hijackers.
Converse InfoSeek.
Yeah, if you're exactly right. If you're the
Converse
NSA,
was spying on my personal computer, by the way.
Right. If you want, right. If you're the NSA and you want to relay information to the higher ups at the State Department to make preparations for 9/11 to be allowed to happen, well, you would just need the air defenses to be on exercises without hot guns. And what I mean by that is that without the air defense doesn't have weapons, and they were doing exercises.
We know all about what hot guns and cold guns mean right now with what happened in the news lately.
So. And on top of that,
did something happen in Hollywood?
Sorry to throw you off there, Adam.
You had a number of exercises that day. Vigilant Guard and Global Guardian, Amalgam, Verbal 1 and 2.
9/11.
Like so with all this, all the air defense away from the East Coast, the hijackings take place. They go unabated. And there's a naval aid that comes. This is the story. The naval aid comes into the Presidential Emergency Operations Center, the PIOC, and he goes into and he sees Dick Cheney on the phone. Now, the naval aide is John Cochran, Douglas Cochran, that's his name, Douglas Cochran. He comes in, he goes, "Sir, the plane is 50 miles out." And he gets no response. It all goes all the way down to, "Sir, the plane is 10 miles out. Do the orders still stand?" And Cheney just quips around, he whips his neck, he goes, "Of course the orders still stand. Have you heard anything to the contrary?" Well, it's not a shoot-down order because there is no planes with any weapons in the sky. That's a stand-down order. That's to let the plane come, because it wasn't an act of war when the plane hit the World Trade Center, but it was an act of war when the plane hit the Pentagon, because immediately after the plane hit the Pentagon, Secretary of the Defense Donald Rumsfeld said on Meet the Press that when that happened, it was an act of war. Well, you would think it would be an act of war when the planes crashed into the World Trade Center, but no, only to the center of all military headquarters at the Pentagon. Do I think it was on purpose? Sure, absolutely. Can I prove it? Well, I can make a good argument. Proving it would be a little bit difficult, but not impossible.
He lied about where he was and which plane he was talking about.
Well, sure. And at that time,
lying about your timeline, right?
Right, and he's not the only one, too. I mean, Donald Rumsfeld is not where he needs to be, which is at the Presidential Emergency Operations Command or at his desk, because now he's out of the script. He's outside helping people. Now, why is he doing that? So now who's running the country's defenses? Nobody. And at the time, when you need it in this existential crisis of, they don't know how many planes are being hijacked, allegedly. They don't know where they're going to be crashed to. So you would think that he needs to be where he's at in order to coordinate the national defenses. Well, it wouldn't have mattered anyway, because according to Major General Arnold, Larry Arnold, he basically says at the 9/11 Commission that none of the planes would have interfered with the hijackers anyway, because one, they needed authorization for the shoot down, and two, none of them got back to their bases and loaded up with guns until all the exercises were completed. That's not speculation. That's for the public record. He actually said that. And he also said that with Ralph Eberhart, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Richard Myers as well, that all the planes in the sky, the national defenses, were without weapons. In fact, Flight 93, according to Heather Penny of the Air National Guard, said that she was actually going to crash into the plane and then parachute out of her plane. She was actually requested.
Right before she'd hit 93, right before
That's
she
right.
bludgeoned. Yeah.
Right, that's right. So yeah, do I think, Reed, that they allowed the attacks to happen? Damn right. Because what came after 9/11? Much worse than 9/11 itself.
Yeah.
January
So,
6th. No, just kidding.
Nelson, where do you think Flight 93 was going?
Like when it turned around, I mean, some people had tried to even say when it was going to hit Building 7, which is really silly because it wouldn't have been able to hit it because of the trajectory. And the official story says it was going to hit the Capitol. And there was even some speculation, even on the day of, that it was going to go hit Camp David. But my opinion is, I think it was going to hit the CIA headquarters because that is where they've been wanting to strike. That's always been a primary target. But before they turned around, because they did take over the plane, and then it still was going in the west direction for quite a while. Depending on if there was communication, because I think there still was some sort of central command control, of as far as coordination, because like I promote that there was more hijacking, so there's going to be technicalities and problems, so you want to be able to coordinate things, especially if you got the Twin Towers as your main the main targets you want to hit first. You want to make sure everything is going to go there if you're going to launch 5 planes from Logan Airport, which is what they were going to do, which is what was part of the plan. So my point with Flight 93 is that I think they were initially going to go to Sears Tower. They were going to go to Chicago. But then when the other flights, once the FAA put the no-fly ban, they turned around and, had to strike somewhere near DC, because that's where they wanted to concentrate their the main targets at, New York and DC. But
they had announced to the plane that we're going back to New York, so the passengers would have noticed if they took a sudden turn south, but maybe they did, and that's why they took it out. But they may have been doubling up on the World Trade Center. They didn't know whether those were going to fall or not, so they could have hit it again with another plane. We won't know, but they said themselves we're going back to New York, and so a lot of passengers up until that time, most hijackings were going to land the plane and hostage negotiate, right? Mm-hmm. So they didn't know they're going to be crashing a building. Well, they gotten word to airphones or what have you that no, they're running them into landmarks, and so they decided to charge the cockpit. But it would have kept them quiet if they thought, oh, we're going back to New York and we're going to land in New York. They must have been going there. Now, as Nelson said, they could have pulled an audible if they had gotten wind that no, you're not going to make it that far, or whatever, and try to hit something around you. But they had said themselves. But what's interesting is all the mass media said it was going to hit the White House, and there's no evidence said by anybody in Al-Qaeda otherwise saying they were going to hit the White House. It's just everybody said that. They go, the fourth one was going to hit the White House. Well, how do you know where the fourth one was going? It was going northeast. It was in Pennsylvania, and it had been going northeast since it turned around. They said they're going back to New York. That's where they were headed. And it just sort of dipped like that for a second. Like they're like, okay, let's try to hit Virginia. But it may have been doubling up on the Pentagon. It may have been doubling up on the World Trade Centers, because they didn't know for sure that the fires were going to take the buildings out or not. But one more would definitely seal the deal. They also didn't know how many of their other attempted hijackings had not taken place or not, because there were more than the 4 planes in the plan.
I can tell you also this: the second phone call from passenger Peter Hansen on Flight 175, many minutes before it struck the South Tower, he had said to his father that the hijacker, they said they'd taken over, but he says it sounds like they're talking about crashing it into a building in Chicago. They were talking about Chicago and then hitting a building there.
And so, Sears had been cased. They had cased the area for Sears Tower.
We know that.
And I mean, they even cased the Mexican Parliament, but they'd cased the Sears Tower, and they'd cased the Sears Tower back in '93 too, didn't they?
Yeah. It was always been a target. It will remain a target, unfortunately.
In the Holland Tunnel, but you don't need a plane to hit a tunnel.
That's right. The original operation for 9/11, if we believe the official narrative coming out of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and I take this with a grain of salt because he was tortured. But if we believe the original plot was for hijacking of 10 planes and to have them crash all over the United States, including the Sears Tower, Golden Gate Bridge, one was a nuclear facility, and the last plane was going to be piloted by somebody, and Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was going to kill all the men, leave all the women and children, land that plane, and then give a press briefing. And bin Laden said it'd be too much. However, it doesn't explain to the other hijackings as well. Now, I'm not talking about this being an Al-Qaeda operation. I had this conversation with Nelson before about the extra hijackings. They don't necessarily have to be Al-Qaeda. They could be operatives coming from who knows where, the intelligence committee, someone from abroad, domestic organizations, what have you. Doesn't matter. We do know that there was going to be a larger operation involving 9/11, which was going to hit the intercontinental United States. And this is something that was brought up with Nelson in his film, Pachinko Maximum, about 9/11 being a two-pronged attack. That's not coming from speculation. That's coming from prima facie evidence. Also from the testimony of the alleged 20th hijacker, Zachariah Moussaoui, who said at his own trial that he was selected to be part of the second wave of attacks. Now, when was that second wave going to happen? It was going to happen either on 9/11 or on the days when the airlift ban was going to be lifted. That's September 13th, 14th. But we do know that there was going to be extra hijackings. Who were these people? And why were these people deported immediately? That's